I've been married to Jessica for 7 years. We met in college, and like so many couples, we thought we were perfect for each other. She was the life of the party, always inspiring laughter with her biting humor and sharp wit. I was more of the quiet type, and together we balanced each other out. We shared dreams, built a life, and for the most part had a good marriage. But lately, things felt off. It started with little things: her late nights at work, the sudden need for me time, and the way she had taken to spending hours on her phone. I brushed it off at first. After all, life gets busy, right? But then the signs began to pile up. She started to dress differently, more provocatively, and when I asked her about it, she'd blow me off with a snarky, "Just trying to keep things fresh, babe." I wanted to believe her, but deep down, that voice of doubt grew louder. One day I came home early from work, planning to surprise her with dinner. Instead, what I found was a surprise of a different kind. Her car was in the driveway, but Jessica was nowhere to be found. I noticed her phone sitting on the kitchen counter, buzzing incessantly. Out of curiosity and a surge of anxiety, I picked it up. The screen lit up with a message from a number I didn't recognize, but the name, it made my heart drop. "Hey, babe, can't wait to see you tonight." My hands shook as I read the exchange between Jessica and this guy, Jake. He was my ex's new husband. The irony was almost sickening. Jessica had hitched her wagon to the man who had married someone I used to love. I felt the room spin. I couldn't believe it. It was like the ground had dropped out from under me. As rage and disbelief washed over me, I felt a sickening mix of betrayal and fury. I had to confront her, and my mind raced with images of what they could be up to. I was a mess when she walked through the door, still wearing that bright red dress that clung to her body like a second skin. There was a time when I loved that about her, the way she drew attention, but now all I felt was anger. "Jessica." I started, my voice low and shaking with suppressed rage. "We need to talk." She could sense the tension, and I could see the gears turning in her head. "What's wrong?" she asked, feigning innocence, but I saw the flicker of guilt in her eyes as they darted away from mine. I held up the phone, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. "Care to explain this?" Her expression shifted as she saw her phone in my hands. Her facade dropped. "Oh my God, you went through my phone." She spat, anger rising to the surface. "That's so low, you don't trust me." "It's not about trust. It's about you sleeping with Jake, isn't it?" Her face paled, and for a moment I thought I might see some remorse. But then she sneered, "You don't know anything. It's not what you think." "Then please enlighten me," I replied, sarcasm dripping from my voice. She tried to spin some wild story about how she and Jake were just friends who needed comfort after difficult breakups. But the more she talked, the more I realized how hollow her words were. I could hardly focus on what she was saying. All I could feel was the anger bubbling up inside me, ready to explode. This wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage, it was a betrayal of trust. I felt like a fool for ever believing that our love was strong enough to withstand anything. The emotional impact was like a crushing weight on my chest. I went from shock to pure fury. I had built this life with her, and she had shattered it in a matter of moments. In that confrontation, I knew I had a decision to make. Should I fight for our marriage, or should I let this go? Each second felt like an eternity as I wrestled with my emotions. The laughter and joy we once shared felt like a distant memory. I was no longer the man who would let this slide. It was time for revenge, but first I needed a plan. In my gut, I felt justified in wanting her to feel the sting of her betrayal. If she wanted to play games, then I would outsmart her. I would ensure poetic justice was served. As I stared into her eyes, I made an internal vow. I would not let her get away with this. I would make sure she understood the consequences of her actions, and as I formulated my strategy, a cold smile crept across my face. Perhaps this wouldn't be the end, but rather the beginning of something entirely different. In the aftermath of that brutal confrontation, I felt a mix of anger and clarity. I was no longer the naive husband I had been just hours before. I started to see Jessica for who she really was, a woman who was willing to throw away our life together for a fleeting thrill. I couldn't believe I had ever thought she was the kind of person who valued loyalty and commitment. The days that followed were torturous. We still lived under the same roof, but it felt more like I was cohabiting with a stranger. Jessica acted like nothing had happened, trying to play the nothing's wrong card, but I could see right through her attempts to smooth things over. She would talk endlessly about mundane topics, trying to engage me as if we could just pretend her betrayal didn't exist. I often just stared at her, my thoughts swirling with images of her and Jake together. I started to think about my revenge plan. It needed to be calculated and precise. I wanted to make sure it hurt her, but I also didn't want to get too messy. I had to tread carefully. I didn't want to ruin my own life in the process. I needed allies, people who could help me execute my plan while keeping things under the radar. First, I reached out to my friend Mark. We had been close for years, and he was someone I trusted. I invited him over for beers under the guise of catching up. After a few rounds, the conversation veered toward relationships. I shared a fabricated version of my situation, leaving out the affair but emphasizing how miserable I had been lately. Mark, always the supportive friend, suggested I take a break and do something for myself. That was the opening I needed. I casually mentioned that I was thinking about reaching out to my ex, Anna, to rekindle an old friendship. Why not? Mark said with a grin. She was always into you. Plus, it might drive Jessica nuts. That's exactly what I needed. I was going to make sure Jessica felt the threat of losing me. I texted Anna that night, asking her if she'd be willing to meet up for coffee. To my surprise, she was excited about it. For the first time in weeks, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I was shifting the power back into my hands. As I prepared for my meeting with Anna, I couldn't help but think about the twisted irony of it all. Jessica had crossed a line, and now I was about to dangle the possibility of an old flame in front of her. I was going to show her that I was desirable too, and that she wasn't the only one who could seek comfort outside of our marriage. The day of the coffee meetup arrived, and I walked into the cafe with a mix of nerves and excitement. Anna hadn't changed much. She still had that infectious laugh and a sparkle in her eyes that I remembered from years ago. We talked about old memories, reminiscing about our college days, the wild parties, the late-night study sessions, and the dreams we had shared. It felt good to reconnect, and I could see the chemistry still simmering beneath the surface. But I was careful. I didn't want it to feel like I was using her. I genuinely enjoyed the conversation, but with each laugh and smile shared between us, I couldn't help but think about how Jessica would react. I was already imagining her face when she found out about my little coffee date. I wanted her to feel that pang of jealousy, the way I had felt when I discovered her betrayal. As our meeting wrapped up, I casually mentioned how Jessica had been acting strange lately, obviously not revealing the affair but hinting enough to pique Anna's interest. "You know how it is. Sometimes you just need to rediscover yourself," I said with a knowing smile. When I returned home that evening, I could see Jessica was on edge. She was pacing the living room, her eyes darting toward the door as if she was expecting someone. I played it cool, acting like nothing had happened. But the tension was palpable. I had planted the seed of doubt, and I could sense her discomfort. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a mix of satisfaction and anxiety. My plan was in motion, and while it was only the beginning, I was starting to feel more in control. I could imagine Jessica's mounting jealousy, the way her mind would race as she tried to uncover my secrets. As days turned into weeks, I continued to meet with Anna, each time fueling the flames of jealousy in Jessica. I made sure to leave my phone out on the kitchen counter, where I knew she would see the texts and hear the laughter. Each time I walked back into the house, I could almost feel the tension crackling in the air. Jessica would put on her best act, but I could see through it all. The emotional toll of it all wasn't lost on me. I was becoming someone I never thought I would be, deceitful, manipulative, and vengeful. But I justified it as a necessary step towards reclaiming my dignity. I could feel my anger morphing into something more complex. Each successful step in my plan made me feel lighter, but at the same time, I was aware of the darkness creeping in. The thought of revenge was exhilarating, but I still had to tread carefully. I wanted to make sure I got it right. I needed to keep my eyes on the prize. Poetic justice would be served, and I was ready to watch the entire thing unfold from the sidelines, fueled by years of betrayal and hurt. It was time for the stage to be set, and I was ready for the show to begin. As the weeks passed, my relationship with Jessica became a twisted game of cat and mouse, and I was determined to make her feel every ounce of the betrayal she had inflicted on me. I became a master at playing the part of the oblivious husband while secretly pulling the strings of my revenge. My meetings with Anna became more frequent, and each interaction added another layer to my plan. I knew my next move had to be more calculated. It wasn't enough to simply make Jessica jealous. I needed her to feel threatened. She had to understand that I could move on too. So I began to drop hints around the house, remnants of my time with Anna. I left a few casual texts open on my phone, and I would make sure to mention how much fun I had during our coffee dates, always in a light-hearted, almost innocent tone. One evening, while we were watching TV, I casually mentioned how Anna had invited me to a local concert. "It's going to be a blast. I haven't seen her in ages," I said, trying to gauge her reaction. The look on Jessica's face was priceless. Her smile faltered, and for a brief moment I could see the mask slip. "Oh, that's nice," she said, trying to sound enthusiastic, but it was clear that this was eating her alive. I could feel the tension in the air as she forced a smile. It was exhilarating to see her squirm, knowing that she was beginning to realize I wouldn't be waiting around for her to come to terms with her infidelity. By now, I had also started to utilize social media as part of my strategy. I posted pictures from my outings with Anna, captioning them with vague but suggestive phrases like "good company makes everything better." It was all very innocent on the surface, but I knew Jessica would see it. And she did. A few days later, I noticed her scrolling through social media with a furrowed brow, and my heart raced with the thrill of knowing my plan was working. Despite the fun I was having with this psychological warfare, there were moments that tugged at my conscience. I'd catch glimpses of the woman I had loved, the woman who had shared my dreams and built a life with me, and I felt a pang of guilt. Was I really doing this to hurt her, or was it to heal my own wounds? But the anger I felt over her betrayal was too strong to ignore. I had every right to be vengeful. Then came the night that changed everything. I had planned a dinner with Anna, and this time I decided to take it up a notch. I sent Jessica a text asking if she wanted to join me out for a drink. I wanted to see if she would even consider it, or if she'd try to avoid the situation altogether. To my surprise, she agreed. When we arrived at the bar, I took a seat at the table and waited for Anna to arrive. I was buzzing with anticipation. Jessica walked in, and her expression was one of forced enthusiasm, but I could see the cracks forming in her facade. She was trying so hard to appear nonchalant, but I noticed every little shift in her body language, the way she glanced toward the door every time it swung open, hoping to catch a glimpse of Anna. When Anna finally arrived, I could almost feel the tension in the air thicken. As we greeted each other with warm hugs, I noticed Jessica's jaw tighten. The smile on her face grew increasingly strained as we began to chat and catch up. I played it off as a casual get-together, but the air was charged with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. To add to Jess's discomfort, I made sure to reminisce about past memories with Anna, weaving in stories that highlighted our connection. "Remember that time at the lake house?" I said, glancing at Jessica as she attempted to sip her drink but nearly choked on it. I reveled in her discomfort, my heart pounding with a mix of excitement and guilt. Jessica watched us with narrowed eyes, and I could see her struggle to maintain her composure. "You two seem pretty close," she said, her tone laced with sarcasm. My heart raced. I could feel the power shift in the room. I held back, smirk, knowing I was pulling the strings of her emotions like a puppet master. As the night progressed, I could see Jessica's resolve begin to crumble. The more Anna and I laughed and reminisced, the more Jessica's facade cracked. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction watching her squirm. The realization that her actions had consequences was beginning to sink in. Halfway through the evening, I noticed that Jessica had become increasingly quiet. She seemed lost in her thoughts, her eyes darting between Anna and me as if trying to decipher what was happening. Meanwhile, Anna and I continued to share stories, our chemistry palpable and undeniable. Finally, Jessica couldn't hold it in any longer. She stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back in the process. "You know what? I can't do this. This is ridiculous," she exclaimed, her voice rising above the chatter of the bar. Heads turned, and I could feel every eye on us. "Jessica, it's just a drink. We're having fun," I countered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Fun? Is that what you call this?" She shot back, her anger now on full display. "You think you can just parade her around in front of me and expect me to sit here and take it?" The confrontation escalated quickly, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through me. I wanted to shout back, to tell her all the things I had been holding inside. Instead, I kept my cool, watching as she flared up in frustration. It was beautiful chaos, a storm of emotions swirling around us, and I was standing right in the eye of it. "I'm not the one who betrayed our marriage, Jessica. Maybe you should reflect on your own actions before pointing fingers," I replied, my voice calm but laced with a sharp edge. The words hung heavy in the air, and for a moment I felt a surge of satisfaction. I had done it. I had turned the tables on her. In that moment, I realized that I was no longer the man who would simply accept betrayal. I was reclaiming my power. Jessica stormed out of the bar, and I could feel the weight of her anger trailing behind her like a dark cloud. Anna looked at me, her eyes wide with surprise. "Wow, that was intense," she said, half laughing, half serious. I shrugged, trying to play it cool, but inside I felt a whirlwind of emotions. I had pushed Jessica to her breaking point, and now I could only imagine how she would react. But one thing was clear. The balance of power had shifted, and I was prepared to watch it all fall apart. As I left the bar, a sense of triumph filled me. I was on a path of revenge, and it felt exhilarating. The stage was set for Jessica to confront the reality of her actions, and I was more than ready to let her take center stage. Whatever happened next, I knew I would be there to witness the unraveling of our marriage. And somewhere deep down, I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice for everything I had endured. After the explosive confrontation at the bar, things in our household took a dramatic turn. The silence was deafening. Jessica and I were living in the same house, but it felt like we were on different planets. She was angry, and I was reveling in it. The emotional upheaval that had been brewing between us finally erupted, and I felt like I was watching a slow-motion train wreck. I could see her struggling to process everything that had happened, and in a way, it was satisfying to watch her anguish. She avoided me as much as possible, and I took the opportunity to further immerse myself in my plan of revenge. I continued to meet Anna, and each outing seemed to deepen the divide between Jessica and me. I was careful to keep things casual. I wanted to maintain the facade of friendship while also subtly making sure Jessica saw the signs. One afternoon, I received a message from Anna inviting me to a small gathering at her place. It was the perfect opportunity to escalate things. I replied that I'd love to come, and without hesitation, I sent a quick text to Jessica. "Heading to Anna's place tonight for a little get-together. She's having a few friends over. Should be fun." I watched as the three little dots on her phone screen indicated she was typing a response. When she finally replied, I could almost hear the irritation in her words. "Have fun. Don't do anything stupid." It was almost too easy. I could envision her pacing around our house, fuming. The jealousy and insecurity were palpable, and that was exactly what I wanted. I was playing a carefully orchestrated game, and every move was deliberate. At Anna's gathering that evening, I felt a thrill as I mingled and laughed with friends. The atmosphere was light, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a genuine sense of happiness. Anna and I shared a few moments that were more than friendly, subtle touches and lingering glances that could easily be misinterpreted. I was playing my role well, and I could feel the weight of Jessica's emotions pressing down on her from afar. As the night went on, I received several texts from Jessica. Each one became increasingly frantic, a reflection of her mounting anxiety. "Are you coming home soon? How many people are there? I hope you're not drinking too much." I chuckled to myself as I read her messages. She was unraveling, and I was enjoying every moment of it. By the time I returned home, the clock was ticking past midnight. I opened the front door and found Jessica sitting on the couch, arms crossed, her expression a mixture of anger and worry. She looked as though she had been waiting for me, and I couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction at having kept her on edge. "Nice of you to finally show up," she snapped, her eyes narrowing at me. "Hey, it was a good time. You should have come," I said, keeping my tone light and casual. "Why would I want to hang out with your ex?" She shot back, her voice laced with venom. I shrugged as I walked past her toward the kitchen. I poured myself a glass of water, pretending not to notice the tension radiating from her. "Anna's just a friend. We had some laughs, that's all," I replied, trying to keep my tone even. She stood up, her face flushed with anger. "This isn't funny, you know. You're flaunting your little rendezvous in my face. It's humiliating." I turned to face her, allowing a smirk to creep onto my face. "Oh, come on. You're not seriously trying to play the victim here, are you? You're the one who cheated." "Shut up," she yelled, her voice echoing through the house. "You're being a complete jerk, and you know it." "You think I'm being a jerk? I think you should start to understand what it feels like to lose someone. You made your choices, Jessica. This is just a taste of what you've done to me," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. The realization of what I had just said hung in the air like a dense fog. I was treading dangerous waters, but the rush of power was intoxicating. For so long, I had been the one hurt, and now I was finally reclaiming my narrative. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, and I knew deep down that the emotional fallout was only beginning. Jessica's eyes filled with tears, and I felt a flicker of guilt. But just as quickly, I pushed that feeling aside. I had come too far to back down now. "You're the one who wanted to play games, Jess. This is the reality you created for us. You wanted excitement, and now you're feeling the consequences," I added, relishing every word. "You think this is a game," she said through gritted teeth, tears streaming down her face. "You think I'm enjoying this. You have no idea how hard this is for me. Maybe you should have thought about that before you slept with my ex's husband," I shot back, my words sharp and cutting. We stood there in the kitchen, the atmosphere thick with tension. It felt like a battlefield, and I was ready to fight. But as I looked at her, I caught a glimpse of the woman I once loved. The woman who had become a stranger in my eyes. I felt the anger well up inside me again, and I pushed it down, reminding myself of the purpose behind my actions. "I'm not the bad guy here," I said, my voice steady. "You are, and you need to face that." The tears continued to fall, and for a moment I almost felt bad for her. But the resentment and pain I had endured for weeks drowned out that flicker of sympathy. I was tired of being the one who hurt, and I was determined to see this through. "Maybe we should just end this," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. The words struck me like a punch to the gut, but I quickly masked my surprise. "Is that what you want, Jessica? To run away from the mess you created?" She looked down, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "I don't know, I don't want to feel like this anymore." "Then maybe you should think about what you really want," I replied, struggling to maintain my composure. "But don't think for a second that I'll let you escape without facing the consequences of your actions. You made your choices, and now you have to deal with them." As I walked away, leaving her to process her emotions, I felt a mix of triumph and sadness. I was finally making her confront the reality of what she had done, but I also knew that this would have lasting consequences for both of us. The next few days passed in a blur of tension and silence. Jessica withdrew into herself, and I continued to meet Anna, further solidifying my plan. I could feel the walls closing in on Jessica, and each day that passed, I could sense her desperation growing. My heart raced with excitement at the prospect of what was to come. I was close to achieving my goal, and I could almost taste the poetic justice. As the days turned into a week, I knew soon enough that the climax of this twisted saga was just around the corner. I was ready to watch everything unfold. The game was far from over, and I was determined to see it through to the bitter end. The days stretched into a suffocating routine, with tension escalating in our home. Jessica was a ghost of her former self, shrouded in shadow and silence. I could feel her resentment simmering beneath the surface while I reveled in the new power I had over our relationship. I had turned the tables. It was no longer just about her betrayal, but about my newfound control. However, as much as I enjoyed my little game of revenge, I was acutely aware that the end was approaching, and it was time to solidify my victory. I continued seeing Anna, and each encounter only amplified Jessica's anxiety. I was careful to post updates on social media, casual pictures of laughter and warmth, small moments that painted an image of connection. I could only imagine the knots tightening in Jessica's stomach as she scrolled through my posts, each one a jab at her fragile pride. I was pulling every string, orchestrating a symphony of revenge. One evening, as I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, I saw a notification flash across the screen. It was a message from Jessica, short to the point. "Can we talk?" My heart raced. I had been waiting for this moment, and now it was finally here. I had no idea what direction this conversation would take, but I was ready to face whatever she threw at me. I took a deep breath and replied, "Sure. When?" She suggested we meet at the dining table, so I made my way there, the anticipation building inside me. This was it. The culmination of everything we had been through was about to unfold. I steeled myself for the confrontation ahead. I was going to make sure I had the upper hand. When I sat across from her, I could see the weight of her emotions etched across her face. Her eyes were red from sleepless nights, and she fidgeted with her hands, clearly nervous about what she wanted to say. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," she began, her voice shaky. "About us, about what happened. I know I messed up and I can't change that, but I want to try to fix this if you can forgive me." "Fix this?" I repeated, my tone incredulous. "How do you plan to fix something you broke? You cheated on me, Jessica. That's not something you can just wave a magic wand over and pretend it didn't happen." Her face fell, and I could see the despair wash over her. "I know," she whispered, tears welling up again. "I don't expect you to just forgive me right away. But I want to try. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right." I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. "And what exactly does that look like? How can I trust you again?" She opened her mouth to speak, but words failed her. I'll be honest. No more secrets, I swear. I'll cut ties with Jake, I promise. I'll do anything you need." "Cutting ties with Jake is the bare minimum, don't you think?" I shot back, feeling the heat of anger rise again. "You think that will somehow erase what you did? It doesn't change the fact that you chose to betray me. I know, I get it, I made a mistake, but I love you, you have to believe me." "Do you love me?" I challenged, leaning forward. "Or do you love the idea of having me back because you realize the grass isn't always greener?" She swallowed hard, her vulnerability laid bare. "I love you. I've always loved you. I just got lost, and I don't know how to come back from this." I could feel the anger boiling inside me, but there was also a part of me that was receptive to her words. I didn't want to be cruel, but I could sense that Jessica's pleas were just a desperate attempt to salvage what was left of our marriage. But then the reality hit me. I had already initiated my plan for revenge, and I couldn't let her off the hook that easily. "You say you're willing to do anything, but I need to know you're serious about this," I said slowly. "What do you mean?" she asked, confusion flitting across her face. "I think it's time you really understand what this feels like. You need to experience the consequences of your actions." Her eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" I leaned in closer, lowering my voice so it was barely above a whisper. "I want you to see me with Anna. I want you to feel what it's like to know that I'm moving on while you're still here, crawling in your own regret." "No, you can't be serious," she exclaimed, her voice rising in disbelief. "Oh, I'm very serious," I replied firmly. "If you really want to save this marriage, I want you to understand the full weight of your choices. It's not enough to just say you'll change. I need you to feel the pain you've caused me, just like I've felt it every single day since I found out about your affair. I can't just sit back and watch you with her," she cried, her voice shaky. "Exactly," I said, relishing her anguish. "That's the point. You need to understand that this is your doing. You chose to cheat, and now you need to feel the consequences." She sat back in her chair, defeated and broken. I could see the battle raging within her. She was torn between anger and regret, and I was enjoying every moment of it. "I can't believe you would do this to me," she said quietly, almost as if she were talking to herself. "I'm not doing anything to you that you didn't do to me first. I only want you to see things from my perspective. It's time for you to face the reality of your actions." Jessica sat in silence, her expression filled with a mixture of disbelief and despair. The reality of what I was proposing was sinking in, and I could see her processing the implications. After a long pause, she finally spoke. "You're really going to go through with this, aren't you?" I nodded. "I am. I need you to understand what you've put me through. If you truly love me, you'll come to terms with the consequences of your actions." She looked defeated, her tears flowing freely now. "What if I can't handle it? Then maybe you'll finally understand that love isn't just a word, it's a commitment. And right now, you've broken that commitment." The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging heavily between us. I felt a rush of satisfaction, knowing that I had taken control of the narrative and that Jessica was finally beginning to grasp the magnitude of her betrayal. As I got up from the table, I looked down at her one last time. "I'll be seeing Anna this weekend. I hope you're ready to face the truth." Walking away, I felt a mixture of triumph and unease. I was deep into my plan for revenge, and while satisfying, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling of uncertainty. What if I lost everything in the process? But I knew that I had to see this through. I wanted justice, poetic justice, and it was time for Jessica to face the storm she had created. The final act was set in motion, and I was prepared to watch everything come crumbling down. The weekend arrived, and with it, the culmination of my plan. I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation as I prepared for my outing with Anna. I had told Jessica that I was meeting her, and the look of despair on her face as I walked out the door was something I would never forget. It was the moment I knew she was starting to grasp the full weight of her actions, and yet I felt a flicker of guilt creep into my mind. As I drove to the cafe where Anna and I were meeting, I replayed my conversations with Jessica in my head. I had pushed her to the brink, but could I really follow through with my plan? The power dynamic had shifted dramatically, and I was both the puppet master and the puppet, caught in the web of my own revenge. But I had decided to go through with it for my own peace of mind. Anna was already waiting for me at our usual spot when I arrived. She looked radiant, her smile infectious as she waved me over. I couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth as I settled into the chair across from her. "Hey, I'm so glad you made it," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I've been looking forward to this all week." "Me too," I replied, trying to immerse myself in the moment. For a brief second, I allowed myself to forget the turmoil brewing at home. Anna's presence was comforting, a reminder of a time when I felt carefree and happy. But as we chatted, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was playing a dangerous game. The realization that Jessica would be watching, possibly even finding a way to find out what I was doing, added a tinge of anxiety to my otherwise pleasant afternoon. I was torn between enjoying my time with Anna and the nagging thought that I was about to hurt someone who was once the center of my world. As we laughed and reminisced, I couldn't help but notice how easy it was to slip back into our old dynamic. But a part of me remained vigilant, aware of the stakes at play. I shot Jessica a quick text, "Having a great time, wish you were here." As expected, she responded almost immediately. "You're such a jerk, enjoy your little date." I felt a surge of satisfaction, knowing that my plan was working. I could practically hear her rage bubbling beneath the surface, and it fueled my excitement. But with every chuckle shared with Anna, there was an underlying current of uncertainty. Was this truly what I wanted, or was I simply indulging in a fantasy of revenge? After a few hours, Anna suggested we grab dinner. I hesitated for a moment, contemplating how far I wanted to take this charade. But the thrill of the moment was too strong. I agreed, and we headed to a nearby restaurant. As we sat down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on borrowed time. Jessica was likely pacing around the house, her mind racing with visions of what I was doing. I could almost picture her scrolling through our text messages, piecing together the fragments of my life that I had shared with Anna. Dinner came and went, filled with laughter and flirtation. There was a chemistry that lingered in the air, and for a moment I almost forgot about the chaos I was leaving behind. But as the evening deepened, the reality of my actions washed over me like a cold wave. I excused myself to the restroom, and as I stood at the sink, staring at my reflection, I realized that I was losing myself in this charade. I had started this journey seeking revenge, but somewhere along the way, I had lost sight of what truly mattered. I had become the villain in a story that was meant to be about healing and reconciliation. When I returned to the table, I could see that Anna had picked up on my mood shift. "Hey, everything okay?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "Yeah, just thinking," I replied. She smiled gently, but I could see the concern in her eyes. "If this is too much, we can slow down. I don't want to put you in an awkward position." I took a deep breath, the weight of the evening crashing down on me. "It's not you. It's me," I admitted. I didn't realize how complicated this would get. I saw the disappointment flicker in Anna's eyes, and it broke my heart a little. She had been my escape, but I couldn't allow myself to use her as a prop in my revenge plot. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice heavy. "I need to be honest about my situation." As I explained everything to her, the affair, my feelings of betrayal, and how I was using her as a means to an end, Anna listened quietly, her expression a mixture of sympathy and understanding. "I didn't know it was this complicated," she said softly, "but you need to figure out what you really want." In that moment of clarity, I realized that revenge wouldn't heal my wounds, it would only deepen them. I had been so consumed by the desire to make Jessica feel the pain I felt that I had allowed myself to spiral into a toxic cycle. "I think I need to go home," I finally said, my voice steady. "I need to confront this head on." Anna nodded, a look of understanding in her eyes. "That's probably for the best. I hope you find what you're looking for." As I left the restaurant, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I had made the decision to stop the cycle of revenge. I was ready to face Jessica, not as an enemy, but as someone who had shared a life with me. When I arrived home, Jessica was sitting on the couch, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. I could see the remnants of her tears on her cheeks, and it struck me how much of our relationship still lingered beneath the surface. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice shaky. "I was with Anna," I replied, holding her gaze. "But I realized something important tonight. This isn't about revenge, it's about understanding what we've lost." A flicker of hope ignited in her eyes. "So what now?" I took a deep breath, and for the first time in weeks I felt the urge to be vulnerable. "I don't know. I think we need to talk about what went wrong, but it has to be honest. No more lies." Her expression softened as she nodded. "I want that too. I'm sorry for everything." We sat there, two broken souls staring at each other, ready to navigate the tumultuous waters of our relationship. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I felt a sense of determination that we could find a way back to each other, if we both wanted it. In the end, I had learned that revenge might feel satisfying in the moment, but it ultimately led to more pain. The real challenge was facing the truth, embracing the messiness of love, and deciding whether we could rebuild what had been broken. As I looked at Jessica, I knew we had a long road ahead. But for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other.